بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد ولد آدم أجمعين، وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين على مر الأيام والليالي والشهور والسنين. أما بعد. As we start this first class in this great book, great books of jurisprudence, meaning in fiqh, it is from those books that are considered those books of cultivation, meaning cultivating the people upon the affairs of fiqh, where some of the scholars consider this, rather you'll find that they consider it from the furu', from the branches of the religion. And the branches of the religion are all those matters that are connected with fiqh, al-fiqhiyat. As this first class, we'll give a little nubdha, yasira, a little glimpse of the book and the author himself. As we know, everyone, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the affairs of what He has set down of revelation, He has clarified everything we needed. And that the Sunnah Nabawiyyah, or the prophetic Sunnah, the ulama have given great care, or exhausted great efforts in making sure that all of the knowledge that the Muslims need in general, all around the world, that affairs are facilitated, made easy for them to grasp, especially the most important and vital matters that they need to perfect their worship in every aspect. Even the affairs of what you'll find which are connected with marriage, as you'll find how this religion is complete and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set down is adequate and more. And we do not need to seek guidance anywhere else. Especially in these matters, if the people were to follow it, affairs will be in a state of harmony and all corruption will be removed. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this book, وَمَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا لِتُبَيِّنَ لَهُمُ الَّذِي اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have not set down upon you or revealed to you the book, except in order to clarify to them what they differ in. So you'll find that these ayats, and likewise the authentic sunnah that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam has given of clarity in regards to how he dealt with his families and his wives and his children, meaning from his daughters, and his companions and his families and his tribes and those who are involved in the community in general. We've been given great clarity in order to know how within ourselves we are to conduct and administrate these type of affairs within our daily lives, of how we deal with one another and how we treat one another in regards to the brothers, the sisters, the families, the children, and the likes. These are all matters, like we said, where we need these matters, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the wisdom of why Allah allowed the Messenger of Allah to have different families, is to know how to deal with each individual, every person according to one's condition. As we know, the Messenger of Allah was married to a virgin, and he was married to women who were previously married, to let one know that all of those affairs are acceptable. And they're not like how the non-Muslims, where they go from one extreme to the next. No, I don't want no one who was married previously, rather I want a virgin. Or you'll find that there are people say, no, I don't want a virgin, I just want a woman who's been with a whole bunch of men. Which is a whole bunch of filthy things that this society has warped the minds of the people with no type of balance in whatsoever. Because we know that this country is always on one aspect of every extreme. Either they'll say monogamy is the origin, and then you'll either find at the same time that they just totally wild in another aspect where you could just have multiple partners on both sides in the incorrect way. So it's just absolute chaos, especially here in these lands with the kuffar. But however, Islam comes with a balanced, moderate approach to make sure that everything is in its proper place. That everything is what? That everything is put where it should be, and that the affairs of whether a woman is a virgin or a woman that was previously married, all of those affairs are acceptable, and that a person can marry them and they can have a good life with them. And it does not matter whether she was a virgin or not, or affairs that's connected with, like we said, with the family structure and how to build them properly. But however, just to give a little glimpse of affairs of fiqh, in summary, that this book, brothers and sisters, was made by this great imam, al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah. And he is from those great, if you want to say, for lack of better words, heavyweights in our religion, where a lot of books that he has authored are books that we need in every fen from the funun of the religion, every science, or if you want to say it, or let me come with a better statement, every knowledge. From the knowledges of our religion, you'll find that this great imam has a book in which, to this day, the scholars recommend that they start with his authors and with his treatise that he gave as a service to the religion and for the Muslims who come after. This great imam, Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who died 852 after the Hijrah. You'll find that his book, for example, and we could go on and all the multiple treaties that he's written, where we cannot have the time to talk about all the benefits of those books. From the greatest of his works, for example, is the book that he explained, which is the most authentic book after the Book of Allah, which is the book that was catered towards protecting the prophetic sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is by the great Imam Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Bardizbah al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, where we know the Imam al-Bukhari, his book is not called Sahih al-Bukhari. As a lot of people know, the title of Bukhari or Sahih al-Bukhari is Sahih al-Bukhari. Rather, you'll find that the title of the Imam al-Bukhari was called al-Jami' al-Musnad al-Sahih لسنن رسول الله لأمور رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسننه وأيامه. That is the proper title of Sahih al-Bukhari. Where am I going with this? I'm about to correlate it with Hafiz ibn Hajar right now. The proper title of Sahih al-Bukhari is Al-Jami' al-Musnad al-Sahih لأمور رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وسننه وأيامه. That's the proper title of Sahih al-Bukhari that Imam Bukhari gave it himself. The Imam Bukhari entitled his book, and you'll find that Bukhari is a musnad. It's a musnad. When we say musnad, mean it as asanid. That book is considered with the conditions or the strict conditions that Imam Bukhari put in his book, which is not the conditions of Sahih. It's for the conditions of Asahiyya, the most authentic, where he put very straight conditions in his book, which is not just the regular conditions for an authentic narration of the Prophet ﷺ. That book of Imam al-Bukhari that he put in his book was extremely, if you want to say, extremely hard restriction or conditions in which he brought for the most authentic narrations to be put in his book. Al-Imam al-Bukhari, his book is considered the most authentic book, of course, of the prophetic sunnah, the message of Allah ﷺ. After the Book of Allah, the prophetic sunnah comes in with the ummah, has took it with acceptance, was in those narrations of them being authentic. Then we have the actual scholar who explained the book of Imam al-Bukhari. The one who explained the book was this imam here, Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, in his book entitled Fath al-Bari. Fath al-Bari, in which Ahl al-Ilm that they praise his book by saying about it, La hijrata ba'da fath. As you'll find that there are numerous explanations for Sahih al-Bukhari. A lot of people think Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar is the only one that explained it. No, he didn't. There's a lot of scholars who've explained it. From them is Qustulani. From them is Al-Aini. From them, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar has explanation, but he didn't complete it. Al-Hafiz ibn Rajab, excuse me. Al-Hafiz ibn Rajab, Al-Hanbali, Ibn Rajab, Al-Hanbali, the great Imam, has a sharh for Sahih Bukhari. Like we said, you have Qustulani, who did a sharh for Bukhari. You have Al-Aini, who did a sharh for Bukhari. You have Ibn Rajab, who did a sharh for Bukhari. But you'll find that the ulama have said the greatest of all those shuruh, or those shuruhat, the greatest of those commentaries for Sahih Bukhari is what Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar had explained in his book entitled Fath al-Bari. To the point where Imam al-Shawkani, the great Imam, said about his explanation, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, about Fath al-Bari, he said, La hijrata ba'da al-Fatih. There's no migration after the Fatih. Meaning, to give the high praise of the service that Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar had did for Sahih al-Bukhari by explaining it. And we know to this day, the ulama have given great care of those narrations which is in Sahih al-Bukhari by the commentary and explanation of Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So this great Imam, just to put in perspective the high status of this great Imam, how he explained the most authentic book, or was considered from the most authentic books, which is from what we call the Sahihain, the two authentic books. And when we say that, we mean Bukhari and Muslim. That this Imam Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani explained it in Fath al-Bari. So that's to put in perspective this great Imam. Just that book in itself would be able to now put in the minds of everyone how great this individual was, Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, and the great service that he did for Islam and for the Sunnah, the message of Allah, and for the Muslims in general. That in itself would be adequate in order to put in perspective who he is. But there's more. There's more what he done, rahimahullah. There's other books that is authored that's considered from the foundations in which a person, if they was to specialize in the field of our religion, they would start with his book or the books that he wrote. From them is in the science of hadith. The science of hadith. You'll find Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar have written a book where a student of knowledge, if he wanted to specialize in the field of mustalah, the field of hadith, you would start with his book called, what is it called, everyone? Anyone know? Nukhbatul Fikr. Nukhbatul Fikr is a foundation or a fundamental book of hadith if you wanted to learn mustalah, meaning the science of hadith, of learning how the scholars service the Sunnah, the message of Allah, by protecting it from what is not from it. And we know that we have those books and those sciences to teach us how the scholars of the past have protected the religion of Islam by that type of knowledge. From that knowledge, or from the beginners, or those books that one begins with, is the book entitled Nukhbatul Fikr by this great Imam, or the author of this book called Ahmad ibn Hajar, or Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, or his name rather, excuse me. So you have Nukhbatul Fikr. And Nukhbatul Fikr is a beginner book in mustalah, in hadith. So you notice this great Imam explained the book of Fath al-Bari, which is explained in the most authentic book after the book of Allah, which protected the prophetic Sunnah, the message of Allah, by the great Imam Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. And you'll find, in addition to that, if one wanted to start to specialize in checking hadith, you would start from his book. Even though some of Ahl Ilm has said that one could start with certain other books. They could start with Bayquniyah, which is also a book in Mustalah. You could start with, of course, Nukhbatul Fikr by Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar, but you'll find that the majority of Ahl Ilm, even when I was overseas in Al-Madinah, when I was studying university, Al-Madinah, if not, majority of the scholars recommended that start with Nukhbatul Fikr by Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar if you wanted to specialize in the field of hadith, as far as knowing how to check the authentic narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. Nukhbatul Fikr. It's an explanation for Nukhbatul Fikr called Nuzhat al-Nazar. But at any rate, so you'll find that this great imam has more service, not only just in the affairs of explaining the hadith of the Message of Allah in Sahih al-Bukhari, but in addition to that, you'll find in the science of affairs as pertaining to one specializing in checking the narrations, he also has those great books and those great what? Treatises. From them, Nukhbat al-Fikr, and you'll also find that he has another book that he didn't complete, or I think it was lost. If I'm not mistaken, you'll find another book of hadith, which is tremendous in the field of mustalah. And you'll find that it's called, everyone knows if they're familiar with it, but I'm letting them know now, that's called a nukat. A nukat. By a nukat al-Ibn Salah. And from the best shuruh, or the best service of those who checked it, was from our great imam, Shaykh Rabi' ibn Hadi al-Madkhali, Hafidhullah wa ra'ah, where he serviced that book called Nukat al-Ibn Salah. That book also is from those great books if one were to specialize in the field of hadith. Another book is written by al-Hafidh ibn Hajar. But Nukat is a tremendous book. And if one wanted to specialize in hadith, then they would utilize those type of books. Another book that this great imam, we could go on and on about the books of al-Hafidh ibn Hajar. From them is al-Tamyiz, or al-Isaba, fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba. Al-Isaba, fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba. He has a book called al-Matalib al-Aliyah. We could go on and on and on and on about his books. He has books in Tarikh. He has a book called Lisan al-Mizan, which is in the books of Jarh al-Ta'dil. Lisan al-Mizan. You have al-Matalib al-Aliyah. You have Nukat al-Ibn Salah. And you have this book which is in front of you right now, everyone, which is Buloogh al-Maraam, which is another book in another field of our religion, that this great imam authored a book where students of knowledge are also supposed, if they can, start with in cultivating and raising themselves from the beginner's level all the way up to what? The intermediate level, until one goes to the highest level of fiqh. You'll find that Ahl-Ilm recommended this book that we're going to benefit from, which is entitled Buloogh al-Maraam. Buloogh al-Maraam, translated as obtaining the objective. Obtaining the objective. Where this book has been translated and is mutadawil wa mutanawil fi aydin nas. It is easy obtainable within the hands of the people, and the Muslims all over the world knows this book. It's not just here in America, it's everywhere. Where this book is known with the Muslims all over the world. No matter what part of the world in, and if you're Muslim, except you'll find that the works or the treatises and the books of al-Hafidh ibn Hajar are on the shelves of the Muslims. And from them is this tremendous book entitled Obtaining the Objective. Obtaining the objective, or what they translate in Arabic, as we know, is Buloogh al-Maraam. Buloogh al-Maraam. And Buloogh means obtaining or reaching. Al-Maraam means objective or the goal. But that's how they translate it, if I'm not mistaken, in the books of English. And that is, like we said, from his great works. And he has so many. We can't even count how many books that this great imam has done in service our religion, in service the authentic sunnah of the Message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. Just to give a little history of these affairs of fiqh, you'll find that history of all those books that have given great care of preserving the authentic sunnah of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam comes in different musannafat, different types of books that have gathered the authentic sunnah so the Muslims can obtain knowledge and be upon clarity in regards to how they deal with their everyday affairs pertaining to their religion and their daily lives, and how all of them are connected, and how everything that we have of obtained of knowledge, if it's applied to our daily lives, it will bring benefit and it will bring protection from the evils of this world, from the devils that are not seen and the devils who are come in the form of human beings, that know for sure that every time you put practice or apply an authentic sunnah, the Message of Allah, Allah will put barakah in your life and He will also protect it. Allah will put barakah in your life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also grant you protection. So, those affairs of the books that we know, which are famous, or not to say famous, which are known rather, from those books is Sunan Abi Dawud, which we all know, with Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah. We already mentioned the Sahihain. But the Sunan, those books that were called Sunan, which gathers all those narrations to know the dealings of our Prophet ﷺ, and those prophetic, authentic traditions. So we know that these affairs are not newly invented because of the other fractions or the other religions that fell into worshiping Allah upon deviant methodologies or unauthentic narrations or lies or fabrications. Walillahi alhamd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved our religion and preserved His book and preserved the authentic sunnah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to us these great ulama to give great care in order for these narrations to be gathered. That they sacrificed their lives and their times going to different lands and going to different remote lands. Lands that they would utilize their riding beasts to travel great distances in order to gather these great traditions and authentic traditions so the Muslims can worship their Lord upon clarity, not upon newly invented matters or different opinions or different ideas, or with the emotions, especially to how people do these days. They draw close to Allah based upon how they feel and what makes me so-called feel good, even though it's an act that's incorrect and displeasing to Allah. All those different types of books of the Sunnah, as we know by the great Imam Abu Dawud. And we know his name was not Abu Dawud, his name was what, everyone? Sulaiman ibn Ash'ath al-Sijistani. But we know his name is Abu Dawud, that is his kunya. But his name was Sulaiman ibn Ash'ath al-Sijistani. And then we have also the great Imam al-Tirmidhi in his Jami' of the Sunnah of the Message of Allah. And we know Tirmidhi, his name was Abu Isa Muhammad ibn Isa. Abu Isa Muhammad ibn Isa, al-Tirmidhi. And we know that the land of Tirmidh is currently located where, everyone? In Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, which is not far from China. It's not that far from China. Uzbekistan is the location of Tirmidh, where you'll find that the great Imam al-Tirmidhi is from. And his name was Abu Isa Muhammad ibn Isa al-Tirmidhi. You guys writing this down? Or, because if I test you later, you should know. I will ask you what was some of the books of Hafiz ibn Hajar. Or I might ask you what was from the greatest of his works. I might ask you some other questions. Well, you guys are just going to go back to the recording. طيب. So you'll find that Abu Dawud, al-Tirmidhi, al-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, al-Qazwini, the great Imam, all these books service gathering all the authentic traditions of our Prophet ﷺ. These type of tasanif you'll find at Ahl Ilm, they say. You'll find that the scholars of what they extracted of now, affairs pertaining to fiqh, you'll find that they call those books, for example, ahkam. Books of ahkam. Ahkam also is another affair that's connected with fiqh. You call them books of ahkam. So when you hear the word ahkam, that's also, you will make the what? The connection with affairs of fiqh, of fiqhiyat. You'll find from the most books we're talking about in history, and I'm just going to give a brief little history of it. Not without going too much in detail so we can get into the book itself. But I wanted everyone to have a proper perspective of this great Imam and the history of how great our religion is as far as giving us clarity in worshiping Allah upon insight and upon affairs that Allah, what He said in His book, has actualized. Meaning, it came to light or it came to pass by seeing these type of books and how clear they are and the clear guidance we've been given. And also familiarizing ourselves from the great scholars of the past who also gave great works or gave great service and donated and exhausted their efforts for the ummah and how the history came all the way up to how it arrived to what the great Imam al-Hafidh ibn Hajar had did for the religion. But before his book, Buloogh al-Maraam, in the early part of history of books that's pertaining to ahkam, you'll find there's a book called al-Ahkam al-Kubra wal-Wusta wal-Sughra by the great Imam Abdul Haq al-Ishbili. And that book is still around. I have it in my library. I have all three. Kubra, Wusta, Sughra. Kubra is more in detail. Rather, it's the most in detail in affairs is connected with ahkam. Ahkam. That was in the early part of history. Early part of the stages of fiqh and how it came gradually, starting with the likes of these types of books from these great scholars of the past. And his name was Abdul Haq al-Ishbili. And he has a book in ahkam that's called al-Ahkam al-Kubra. Al-Kubra means the largest, meaning that it's the most in detail. Then you have what he call al-Ahkam al-Wusta, meaning the intermediate type of gathering of affairs of fiqh in his book. Then you have Sughra, which is the summarized version of his book, in affairs of ahkam, meaning affairs of fiqh. Then you'll find, as time progressed, you'll find there was another scholar that his name was Ibn al-Kharrat. Ibn al-Kharrat. Ibn al-Kharrat. With a ta at the end of his name. Al-Kharrat. Al-Mutawaffa sanata 581. Who died 581 after the Hijrah. So after the great Imam Abdul Haq al-Ishbili came another great Imam that also gave a great service in this affair of ahkam and fiqh. And his name was Ibn al-Kharrat. Ibn al-Kharrat, who died 581 after the Hijrah. Just to keep, I'm trying to keep everything simple as much as I can. After that came another book from another great Imam, where his grandson was considered from those who revised the religion. When we say revised, meaning he called the Muslims to come back to what they had left off of the truth. Not that he came with anything new, but his grandson was Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. But that's not who we're speaking about. We're talking about his grandfather. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, his grandfather, whose name was Majduddin Abdul Salam ibn Abdullah ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani, al-Dimashqi. He has a book in fiqh. So Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah's grandfather, whose name was Majduddin, was a great scholar of our religion. And he also authored a great book catering towards this topic of ahkam, of fiqh. The great Imam. His book was called Al-Muntaqa fi Akhbar al-Mustafa. Al-Muntaqa fi Akhbar al-Mustafa. Al-Muntaqa في أخبار المصطفى. المنتقى في أخبار المصطفى. المنتقى means that which was carefully selected. المنتقى, انتقى ينتقي, means something that was carefully selected. And the word muntaqa comes from the derivative naqa, naqi. And we know naqa in the Arabic language means something to be strained out until it becomes purified. You understand, everyone? As we know, nastanshiq al-hawa al-naqi, like pure air, or something that's naqi. Naqi means what? Something that's been sifted out until it becomes pure. So notice that from those derivative is a verb intaqa, yantaqi. So in the Arabic language, the word intaqa means to select it until to carefully what? Until it's purified. Until you come from this word al-muntaqa, meaning something that he carefully selected and brought out so it can cater towards the authentic narrations of the Prophet ﷺ and affairs of ahkam. And affairs of ahkam. So you'll find that the grandfather of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, like I said, we're talking about the grandfather of Shaykh al-Islam. So that shows that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah came from a background of great scholars in his family. So everyone is familiar with Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah. I'm sure that all of the Muslims are, whether they be from those who aid him or his enemies, from those who deviated. But the point of the matter is you know who he is. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, his grandfather was Majduddin. And he was Abdus Salam. As we know, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, what's his name, everyone? Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, not his grandfather, we're talking about Shaykh al-Islam now. His name was Abu al-Abbas, Taqiyuddin, Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim, ibn Abdul Salam, ibn Taymiyyah, al-Harrani, al-Dimashqi. And we know that Shaykh al-Islam was from where? Damascus. Damascus is where, everyone? In Syria. Right, everyone? طيب. Al-Harrani, Dimashqi, and not only that, Shaykh al-Islam was Numaydi. But at any rate, that's irrelevant. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah's grandfather, Majduddin, Abdus Salam, Ibn Abdullah Ibn Taymiyyah, had a book called Al-Muntaqa, the selected narrations, or the purified selected narrations in the affairs or the narrations of Mustafa, meaning the Prophet ﷺ. That book was a book that was also authored in Ahkam, in fiqh. And we know Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah's grandfather died 653 after the Hijrah. You guys writing this down? 653 after the Hijrah. Is this too much word? If this is too much, I'll make it more basic. I don't want to keep it too detailed if it's too much for the people. Well, I'll try to make it a little bit more easier. But this just to give a little glimpse of history, of how our religion was protected and the great scholars that put forth great efforts and sacrificing for the ummah until it developed as far as in the books that were facilitated to make everything easy for people to learn. So you have the course of history. Number one, we start with the great Imam Abdul Haq al-Ishbili in his book called Al-Ahkam al-Kubra wal-Wusta wal-Sughra. Then you have after that, from the books of Ahkam, from the great Imam Ibn al-Kharrat. Then we have the third, which was the grandfather of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, his name was Majduddin Abdus Salam Ibn Abdullah Ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani al-Dimashqi, al-Harrani, who died 653 after the Hijrah. توفي سنة 653 653 after the Hijrah. After that book, now comes the book I'm sure that some of us are familiar with. Rather, after this book, then I'm sure that everyone will start now be familiar with what we're going to mention after this book here. But we're not going to make it too long. Just keep it brief. I'm sorry, everyone. But after the book, Al-Muntaqa was another book. Another book in Ahkam that was from the students of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah. His name was Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Abdul Hadi. If you want to call him, he was known as Ibn Abdul Hadi. Ibn Abdul Hadi has a book called al-Muharrar fil Hadith. Al-Muharrar, which was a book which was from the curriculum in University of Medina when I was studying. It was a book that was in the curriculum in the University of Medina in the affairs of fiqh. It was called al-Muharrar fil Hadith. Al-Muharrar means something that was something, if you want to say, for lack of better words, edited. As we know, the word harrara, yuharriru in Arabic means to edit. To edit something, to check it. To edit, to check it, to edit. So, al-Muharrar in the Arabic language here means something that was checked or selected in hadith by the great Imam Ibn Abdul Hadi, who was from the students of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Abdul Hadi al-Maqdisi. And we know that the family of the Maqadisa was a blessed family, with so many scholars that have come and gave their efforts for our religion of Islam. And from them was him. Then you have scholars who came after them from the Maqadisa family, from the Maqdisi family. Everyone is familiar with the book called Umdat al-Ahkam. Was by who, everyone? Diya ad-Din al-Maqdisi. From Diya ad-Din al-Maqdisi. That is the most basic book of fiqh that every student of knowledge starts with when they want to now specialize in the field of fiqh. That is the most easiest of all those books, which is called Umdah al-Ahkam. Umdah al-Ahkam by Diya ad-Din al-Maqdisi. So you see, they were all from the family of what? Maqdisi. Ibn Abdul Hadi was Maqdisi. Diya ad-Din, Maqdisi. Also from those great books in fiqh, which is from the most extensive of those books, and the Hanbali madhab, you don't have to write this down, was in the book, if anyone can remember, maybe I'll give them a reward. He was also from the Maqdisi family. Does anyone know who he is? It's in the Hanbali madhab, as far as in the most extensive books of fiqh. I'll go back to it, inshallah. I don't want to get lost on track, but I'll tell everyone later, inshallah. The point of the matter is that the Maqdisi family was a blessed family and from the great scholars of our religion. From them, like we said, is Ibn Abdul Hadi. And from them was Diya ad-Din al-Maqdisi, which he gave the most basic book in fiqh that any Muslim can start with, which is called Umdat al-Ahkam. From those scholars that came after Ibn Abdul Hadi was this great Imam al-Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who died 852. Until it led up to this book of what is in our hands right now. This book that we're going to study from, or a chapter we'll study from. This book. Called Buloogh al-Maraam. Buloogh al-Maraam. Min Adillat al-Ahkam. Buloogh al-Maraam min Adillat al-Ahkam. By the great Imam al-Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, but his name is Ahmed ibn Adi. Ahmed ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, rahimahullah. In which one, like we said, we're going to study a chapter from right now. Or next class if we have a little bit of time left. This tremendous book entitled Buloogh al-Maraam, which you'll find that the affairs of fiqh was studied in certain ways, everyone. It was studied in certain ways. From those ways, you'll find how the books of fiqh were studied either by the tariq al-muhaddithin or by the tariq, you'll find, of what they call the kalam of Ahl ilm. From those affairs, meaning the method of hadith, of how the books of fiqh or the books of ahkam were studied. Then, inshallah, I'll try to bring in a book that you'll find that some of the books of fiqh was studied by how that scholar had written of those different types of ahkam that he had said for himself for his own madhab. For example, Sharh al-Mumti' or Zad al-Mustaqna', which in the author you'll find that he gave certain lines of what he thought was the most authentic proof in certain affairs of fiqh in which he actually said. And then after that, you'll find that the scholars come back and they'll come behind him or come to that book and they'll critique it and start to explain it. Does it agree with the sunnah or does it agree with the sunnah or disagree? Is this an actually authentic proof that's correct? That type of example I'll give later, inshallah. But this book specifically, Buloogh al-Maraam, this type of book, Buloogh al-Maraam, is studied upon the method of people of hadith. The book Buloogh al-Maraam is ala tariq al-muhaddithin. It's upon the method of the people of hadith. So, you'll find that al-Hafid ibn Hajar had gathered in it the usul of al-dillat al-hadithiyah. You'll find that he combines between the service of the affairs connected with mustalah of hadith and he combines it with fiqh and will give certain rulings. The affair that I wanted to arouse everyone's attention to is to know that the authentic narrations or the weak narrations, you'll find that Al-Hafid ibn Hajar will gather all of them in this particular book for certain reasons. So just because Al-Hafid ibn Hajar might have mentioned it in Buloogh al-Maraam does not mean that is what? Authentic. You'll find in certain instances that we'll talk about inshallah that he does bring a weak one for a reason. Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. شهادة محمد رسول الله. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. الله أكبر. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وبعث المقام محمود الذي وعدته. طيب. So just to give of what to expect. So when we start the actual chapter in the book of Kitab al-Nikah, you'll find that وَكَانِ اعْتِمَادُهُ بِالشَّكْلِ الرَّئِيسِي عَلَى الْكُتُبِ السِّتَّةِ, especially in regards to what the great imam, what he relied upon in this book, in Buloogh al-Maraam, in which he utilized telling or giving azm, referring the hadith that we'll cover. And all these type of principles that we're mentioning right now, we'll give examples of it when we start the actual chapter. You'll see it actualized once we start. Because a person might say, well, I don't understand. But once we start, you'll understand clearly what the great imam and all the affairs that we're mentioning now has connected. For example, when I just said before the adhan, for example, you'll find that al-Hafiz ibn Hajar in brief or in summary, that the usul of al-Adillat al-Hadithiyah, the affairs pertaining to those books that are considered the usul of hadith, meaning of those books that we go back to for hadith, of, for example, the Kutub al-Sittah, of, for example, al-Bukhari, or Muslim, or Sunan Abi Dawud, Tirmidhi, wa Nasa'i, wa Ibn Majah, and al-Nasa'i, how he will bring the hadith and he will refer it back to those particular sources, as you'll find that we'll do once we cover the actual chapters when they come. In addition to that, how he connects those same narrations with affairs that's pertaining to fiqh, how he's going to combine them. And we'll talk about that, like I said, once we start in the chapter. So you'll find the affairs that he relied upon is upon those books, the Kutub al-Sittah, the 6 books of hadith that we just said. In addition to what al-Hafiz ibn Hajar will also use other references. For example, Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, or Sahih ibn Hibban, or Sahih ibn Khuzaymah, or Mustadrak al-Hakim. And other than that, from the books of hadith that are well known amongst the Muslims, which are considered from our books that have catered towards preserving the authentic narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. You'll find out how he utilizes it for those matters, or he uses these types of phrases at the end of hadith, referring them back to those sources, as you'll find that. And it's going to be clear once we start. So this book is just to get ourselves familiar with affairs before we actually start the book itself, so you can know this great imam and his great status and a little bit of history that's pertaining to the affairs of old, of how the affairs of fiqh developed, and those scholars that catered towards that particular topic, and how it arrived to what it arrived to of today. And those great scholars that have put forth great efforts and exhausted themselves in order to make things facilitated and easy for the Muslims to learn their religion. And once we start in the book itself, you'll see how the affairs are clear, and he carefully selected narrations for each chapter so it can suit the Muslim for if they want to learn. For example, the affairs pertaining to marriage, he carefully selected the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ so you can learn that matter. Or if it's affairs that's pertaining to salah, then you'll find that the narrations of how to perform the prayer correctly. You'll find that he gathered those narrations in that chapter. Or, for example, you'll find of affairs that pertain to Hajj, or affairs that's pertaining to business transactions, or business sales, or affairs that's pertaining to adab, affairs that's pertaining to manners. All those matters you'll find in each chapter. He brings the narrations in those particular chapters, and he keeps it summarized, not too long. Because that's another affair that you're going to notice, that the chapter is not too long. The affairs of marriage and his chapters are not very long. He kept it in summary and in brief. So, the student of knowledge, or the one who wants to learn this type of matter or this particular topic, they can start with something easy, and they can raise their level as they finish these type of books, and then they can go to something more difficult, meaning starting with what's basic, then going up to the level what is intermediate, meaning in the middle, and then they can go to what is more extensive if they wanted to further their knowledge in those aspects. So, that is just to conclude the little topic, just to give a little introduction before we actually start. Then we can also talk about, for example, those other scholars of today who explain this book, because this book has been explained by numerous scholars, meaning Buloogh al-Maraam itself. The book Buloogh al-Maraam, or Obtaining the Objective, has been explained by numerous scholars. It's been explained by numerous ulama. And that we can also speak about that. But I'm not going to go too much into that. But we'll just suffice by one book, because there's a lot of books of scholars that have explained the book Buloogh al-Maraam. From them is Muhammad ibn Ismail al-San'ani in his book called Subul al-Salam, which is the Sharh of Buloogh al-Maraam. Somebody's phone on. The book called Subul al-Salam, the Sharh of Buloogh al-Maraam fi Adillat al-Ahkam, which is by Muhammad ibn Ismail al-San'ani. This book entitled Subul al-Salam. Subul al-Salam. So that's from the shuruh of Buloogh al-Maraam. From the shuruh of Buloogh al-Maraam, and there's others. There's a lot of explanations. And to the point where, from our great scholars of today who have explained this book of today, which is well known with the people of the Sunnah, the people of the truth, from them is a great Imam, Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin, rahimahullah. And from them, the Sheikh Salih ibn Abdullah al-Fawzan, or Sheikh Salih ibn Fawzan ibn Abdullah al-Fawzan, hafidhullah. From our great scholars of today who have explained this book and made it easy, facilitated for the Muslims to benefit from it and to attain the knowledge that they need so they can worship Allah in the proper way, with proper guidance, and the affairs were not left to our own opinions and our desires, which was a ni'mah from Allah which He has saved us from, so we would not worship Allah upon evil affairs or affairs that's displeasing to Allah. So that is just to keep it summarized. Oh, it's 15 minutes. But everyone, we'll just keep it right there, and we'll maybe continue next week, inshallah. We'll just read one hadith from Kitab al-Nikah. We'll just read the first one and we'll stop, inshallah. If there's any questions, we'll take them now, inshallah. So you find al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, they entitled the next chapter, the chapter, he entitled the chapter Kitab al-Nikah, the chapter of marriage. The chapter of marriage. You'll find that the first hadith that he put in the chapter was upon the great Sahabi Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud al-Hudali, ibn al-Abd. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud al-Hudali, the great Sahabi. قال لنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباءة فليتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحصن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء. And the hadith is al-Bukhari and Muslim, so he gave the reference. Upon Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that the Messenger of Allah said to us, O young ones, O youthful ones, Ya ma'ashar shabab, meaning shabab, those who are in the state of adolescence, the state of shabab. And shabab, as we know, we'll talk about inshallah next class. What is shabab? Where does it start from? Where does it end? And we'll talk about that next class. But shabab is when a person reaches the state of adolescence. That's where it starts. And we know that's different from certain people to the next. From a woman standpoint, it can start when she has her mens. When a woman has her mens, she's considered in a state where she's ready to bear children. And those affairs of adolescence start. Those affairs of adolescence starts. Or pubic hair, and for men, a wet dream, and for women also, and those other matters. So those affairs of being youthful, those type of matters is when the desires start to reproduce. And those affairs is connected with the word nikah. As we'll talk about that in detail next class. As we know, the word nikah means marriage, but it's also another meaning, which pertaining to intimacy. Intimacy, as we'll talk about. As you'll find, the linguistic meaning of the word nikah means to be intimate. To be intimate. So we know that's part of affairs of being human. Human beings have desires. Human beings develop desires at a certain age, and they continue for a certain standpoint and for a certain stage period of their life until a certain point, and then it starts to go down a bit. But at the most dangerous of affairs, and most is when the person is in a state of their youth. In order to protect their desires and to make sure that it's utilized in a manner that's pleasing to Allah and pleasing to your Lord, and also what is desired as far as what will be a benefit of yourself, and it will also maintain the structure of society without it being corrupted. Because like we said, if these affairs are not protected, then as we know, the state of affairs can become corrupt and the whole community will collapse. And that's what you see today. Affairs that's pertaining to not, or one's desires are not being utilized in the proper way. Where a person is human. But however, you are allowed to have desires, and human beings have desires. However, you are supposed to utilize those desires in a manner that's pleasing to Allah. And to use it with certain hudud of certain types of boundaries, not to transgress, but at the same time, you still can be human. So the word of nikah, notice the Prophet ﷺ said, in taking them in consideration, O youthful ones, whoever is from amongst you is al-ba'a. We'll talk about that next class. Let him get married. Let him get married. So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is as if he's saying, O youthful ones, I know you have desires. I know that it started, and I know it's going to be a fitna on you. It's as if the Messenger of Allah is saying that. I know it's going to be a fitna on you. Your desires have started. Your stage of adolescence has started. So there's going to be fitna and trials for you. What I am now giving you as advice is to do this, to protect yourself. As like I said, the stage of shabab, we'll talk about when it starts and when it peaks and when it's supposed to what? Considered the affair of being a shabab stops. You'll find that at the end that they'll say, we'll talk about this in more detail, some they say 30, 38, and some of them say to the age of 40. To the age of 40 is when the stage of shabab stops. And then his other affairs start to go down a little bit after that. And all that we'll talk about in detail next class of these particular matters. Based upon the fact that in paradise, as we'll talk about, of the narrations of what will be the stage of the age of people in paradise and the hereafter. as you know, you'll find that it will be in the middle, where a person will not be too what? Not too young nor too what? Too old. They'll be in the middle, just right. And all those affairs applies to the same they'll use as an evidence in the dunya, to when your youth is considered over. When it's considered what? Over. And we know those affairs, like we said. We'll get the details of it next class. So the Messenger of Allah said, it's as if he's saying to the youth, whoever from amongst you is al-ba'a. Al-ba'a. And we'll talk about the word al-ba'a next week. Then let him get married. For verily, it will be a means to what? Lower your gaze. To be a means to what? Lower your gaze. And it will be a protection and fortification for your private parts. So, it's as if the Messenger of Allah is also saying to us that these affairs, if it's not utilized in this instance, then it's not permissible. You understand, everyone? Meaning if you go outside of those matters, then those matters are not what? Pleasing to Allah. It's not pleasing to Allah. Meaning Allah will not be pleased with it. If you utilize your desires outside of these matters, Allah will not be pleased with it. So those are the affairs we want to keep in mind. There's a lot of people think, oh, fornication, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It's displeasing to Allah. So keep that in mind. It's displeasing to our Lord. Allah does not like fornicators. And Allah does not like adulterers. And Allah does not like these affairs. He hates these affairs of disobedience. That's the reason why He revealed to the Messenger of Allah the proper directions so you can what? Protect yourself. And He said, from those who have the ability, that's what we'll talk about next week, the meaning of the word ba'a, let him get married. So saying is as if He's saying, oh young one, I know it's going to be a fitna on you. So utilize your desires for the one who has the ability, then let him get married. He didn't say let you get a girlfriend or let you get a boyfriend or go on social media in someone's DMs. He said let you get married. Let one get married and it will protect your private part, meaning from what is displeasing to Allah. And He said if you do not have that ability, then it's upon you to fast. For verily it will be for him a shield or protection. So we'll stop here inshallah and we'll continue next week. So that's the first chapter, the chapter of marriage. And like I said, a little bit more in depth we'll talk about next week of the meaning of the word nikah, linguistically and the other meanings that come along with it. Any questions about the lesson, anyone? From the introduction? I could ask you questions about everything we mentioned. For example, what is from the works of al-Hafidh ibn Hajar? What's from his great works? I might ask you that question. What is considered from the great shuruh of Sahih al-Bukhari? Or I might ask you in general, what are the explanations of Sahih al-Bukhari? As I've heard some Muslims say there's only one explanation. That's a lie. I don't know where they got that from. So there's only one sharh for Sahih al-Bukhari. That's incorrect. There's numerous explanations for Sahih al-Bukhari. Like we said, we have the sharh of Qustulani, you have sharh al-Aini, you have sharh of al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, al-Hafidh ibn Rajab, al-Hanbali, to the end of it. But the greatest of them, which is known, which is Fath al-Bari, which is known. But I just gave you the answer. Those other things is what? Those other things and those questions we might ask. So go back to the recording, get the information you need, and we might test you on it next class or in a couple of classes later. So any other questions about the lesson? Anything else? We'll stop here. I think the sisters might maybe have some. If they don't, we'll send it down after the salah, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.